Kia ora koutou, my name's Calista, so thank you to Nikki for my lovely introduction, and also thank you to Age Concern for inviting me to come and speak with you all. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
And then when I get excited I talk really quickly, so I'll try and slow it down. If you can't hear me properly, please just let me know. A little bit about me. As Nikki says, I work for Te Whatu Ora, but I originally was born in Taiwan. And then I immigrated with my family to Christchurch when I was a little girl. So I grew up in Canterbury, but I do consider Wellington to be my home now. I've been here for almost 10 years. And so I work for the Kenepuru Community Ora service. I would bounce down to Otago for a bit, where it's just where I got my physio schooling. But now I work in the Porirua region, where I look after mostly older adults in the community. I have a mixed caseload. I see people for rehab, also for falls management. But in the most they are kind of in the over 65 category, so very much in the intersection between where your service meets mine. We'll start by talking about recovering after a fall, and then we'll go over some ways that you can help people if they need a little bit of assistance, and ways to do that safely for yourself and for the person. And then we'll talk a little bit about ways that you can use crutches and sticks, especially on places like stairs. And finally we'll talk about extra things that you could do to boost your visiting sessions with your people when you go and see them, especially if it's a rainy day and the walking is kind of off the cards for that day. So after someone's had a fall, the main thing to check for is whether they have had a significant injury, because if they are injured, then you should not try and get them up from the fall. If they've had a broken hip from the fall, trying to walk and weight bear on that hip may do more damage. So if they're in a lot of pain, the best thing to do is just to make them comfortable and keep them warm where they've fallen, and call for an ambulance so that the paramedics can come and get them on a stretcher to assist them properly. But let's just say that they have fallen, but they're able to move. They're probably in a bit of shock because it's a bit of a scary event. The main thing to do is there's a technique that I teach people. It's called the backwards chaining technique. Has anyone heard of it before? Okay, Sue's heard of it before. So I'll go through, there's two things. One is for how the person can get up by themselves, which is always probably the best option to go for, because then you don't put yourself at risk of potentially getting tangled up with them when you're helping them up. And then if you do need to provide some assistance, we'll go through that as well, in terms of how to do that safely to make sure that you're protecting your backs and you're not doing anything like lifting when you're helping them with it. I have also got handouts about the backwards chaining for you all here today, so we'll go through it in the presentation, but feel free to take a handout as well on your way out. I can't take credit for the handout. I've kind of pinched this from the Public Health Agency of Canada, but it's really useful and they have a lot of helpful infographics too, so I've printed out enough copies for everybody. Okay. So if someone's had a fall, the main thing to do is to get them into a side lying position, as you can see in the top left corner. Once they're in that position, the main thing is to get them into an all fours position. Sometimes someone may need a little bit of assistance getting into that position, but if they can roll and turn and then get into kneeling, that's the main position they need to get into. Once they're on their hands and knees, the main thing is to get them close to a stable surface where they can actually get up using a chair. I'm going to demonstrate this shortly. So you can see here that they then need to be able to kind of get one foot in front of them using the chair or a bed surface to help push up with their arms, and then stand up and then sit down in the chair. So I'm going to borrow this chair here and demonstrate what I'm talking about. I'm not sure if this will show up so well on video, but at least everyone in the audience can see me. So let's say I've had a horrible fall and I've fallen on my back. The main thing you need to do is to roll over like this. So see how you can also push through your foot to turn. And you need to get into this propped position here. See how I'm using my hand to prop up? And then you get your hands under, because you need to get your knees underneath. Not everyone falls near a bed or a chair, so this is where they need to be able to crawl over to the nearest surface. So for me, this is the chair here. Once you're at the chair, you want to be front onto the chair like this. Hold on to the chair with your hands, brace yourself through your elbows. Whichever leg is the strongest leg is the one that I'd advise them to try and step up on. So let's say my left leg is the strong one. I'm going to get that in front of me. Easier said than done, especially if you've got a prosthetic hip. But you want to try and get that leg in front of you by any means possible so that you can push up through that leg. Now they can either try and stand, or if they're really tired from doing that big crawl, they can also do a pivot and sit straight onto the chair. and then they can have a breather and do another check and make sure there's, now that the shock's worn up, has anything kind of starting to hurt, or are there any soft tissue injuries, maybe not urgent but definitely needs to be checked out in the next couple of days. If they've had a fall, especially one where they might have knocked their head, I always recommend that they go and see their GP in the week afterwards, just so they can have a bit of a check over and make sure that there's nothing that's been seriously injured during the fall. So my number one takeaway from this is never lift the person. It's so tempting because they might be saying help me, and they've got their arm up waving at you, and it's so tempting to just pull them up through the shoulder. It's really dangerous for you and for the person. If you do that, you could take your back out by straining and lifting and pulling them, and the person's shoulder could also be injured by having excess weight put through their shoulder. So you never want to do that, no matter how tempting, or if the person's asking you for you to help them like that. Just say, it's not safe for me or you. There's a better way to do it. And also the caveat being that if you have tried to get them up using that technique and the one that we're going to talk through as well, and it's just not working, let's say their hip is too stiff, they can't get their leg up in front of you, make them comfortable, keep them warm and calm, call for the paramedics. They've got more people and they're trained to do this, so they can actually have a little bit more muscle power to do it if you cannot do it safely using what I'm teaching you today. So don't be afraid. It doesn't always mean that they need to go to the hospital, but it's a great 2-for-1, because if the paramedics come along, they can help them up, and then they can actually do a quick check on them afterwards. And if everything's looking okay, they can actually stay at home. They don't, just because the ambulance comes doesn't always mean that it's got to be a hospital trip. Yes?
What about if the person's got a knee injury?
Yes. From before the fall?
No, or previous.
Previous, yeah. So I would say still try the same technique. Yeah. It may not be easy for them to get into kneeling. Some things that I try is, if you're around and you can help them, I'll put down some padded towels so that they can try and kneel on the towels instead. The crawl's not easy, so if you're with them, one of the main things you can do is to bring the chair to them. Yeah, because they do need to eventually get on their knees. If they can't crawl, they can kind of, if you're in sideline, you can kind of shuffle yourself a bit like this. It's not easy, but eventually you do need to get onto all fours to get that knee up to push up through the chair. So if they can't manage that at all, then you probably will need to call for the paramedics to assist. Yeah, and so that would be another big takeaway, is don't be afraid to call them for some help, because they do this all the time and they're really used to it, and they can actually do a quick check afterwards as well. Okay, so here are the safe ways for someone to assist. You can assist at any stage of that backwards chaining technique that I just showed you, but what you want to do is you never want to be lifting, you want to be what I call facilitating the movement. So if someone's in that side lying position and they're struggling to get onto all fours, you can help by guiding their hips and shoulders and roll them so that they're kind of lying more face down, and help them slide a knee forwards if it's not too painful for them to bear weight on it, so that they can slowly get themselves into a 4-point kneeling position. You don't want to be lifting them into the 4-point kneeling position. You want to be rolling and guiding and helping them help themselves with the movement. And then once they're ready to stand up, see how this lady's got her hands supported on the lady's hip here. So you can also help guide them into that stand-up movement by almost giving them a forwards facilitation through their hips, so that they can get into this kind of movement. If they were down here before, you can help them and guide them up through the hips here instead. And then here, when they're ready to do the stand, this is also how I'd recommend positioning yourself. You're kind of slightly behind, slightly to the side, so I'd say diagonally behind the patient. And then when they're ready to stand, it's that same positioning, hands guiding the hips, because that's what has to work hardest. The hip muscles have to squeeze so that they can extend and stand up. And your foot positioning is really important, because if your kind of feet are really narrow, you're not very stable yourself. You want to get a nice wide base, and when you're ready to support them, it's that movement of shifting your weight from leg to leg. So you're starting from back here and you're shifting them forwards onto your front leg, and see how you keep your back straight the whole time, because you don't want to be doing any excess pushing or pulling in this position, which puts a lot of pressure on your low back. And then finally, you can help them turn around. This bit should be a lot easier. I think that this is probably the hardest bits in terms of helping the person up. And like I said, I'll just reiterate again, if you cannot manage this by yourself or with a second person that's at home, keep them warm and comfortable, call for the paramedics, and they will come and sort things out instead. Okay, so you can do your best, but if you're not managing it with this kind of technique, then it's probably not safe for you to try and get them up by yourself. So then the next question was, what about getting them up from other surfaces, not just the floor? Because this is kind of hopefully more of a daily occurrence than someone falling on the regular. So I've got a few clips here for us to go through. Here we are. This is from the NHS.
Neha, can you come forward in the chair for me, please? Can you put your hands on the top of your legs for me, because we don't have arms of the chair, and can you look directly ahead? Thank you. Where my hand needs to be is in the lower part of her back, and my hand across to the opposite hip, and I'm going to rock you forward gently. Okay, so we're going to go ready, steady, stand.
So would everyone like to pair up, and then you can have a bit of a practice on each other on your positioning. I might do one demonstration first. I'm sorry, you're in the hot seat. What's your name?
Alan.
Alan, okay. Do you mind being my model for today, Alan?
No.
So I'm going to pretend that I'm going to have to assist you up. The first thing to do, luckily you're all in very nice chairs with handles. In the video they don't, which may happen sometimes. But if they're in handles, make use of the handles. They're there for the patient to push up on when they stand. So Alan, first thing I'll get you to do is shuffle forward. So bring your bum forwards as far as you can in the chair, hands on the handles, and then you want to tuck your feet back, so slide your feet as far back as you can. Now with my positioning, I'm going to be side on to Ellen, and like she showed in the video, one hand in the front of the shoulder and one hand in the low back like this, and that gives me the most support for Ellen through his trunk. So Ellen, I'm going to say ready, steady, stand. I'm going to rock together with you, and on stand, I'll stand you together, okay? So ready, steady, and stand, forwards and up. Beautiful, beautiful job. Okay, didn't need much help from me, but I don't know if you could see clearly, but I also had that nice wide lunge stance that I was showing you before, and again it's that weight transfer of the back leg to the front leg. So I started from back here, and when Alan was ready to stand, I shifted my weight forwards, and then he stood up by himself. There was no lifting. He's doing all that work through his legs. I'm just helping to facilitate that forward movement as he comes up. And then last of all, this one might be more common for all of our volunteers. This is about ways to make it easier for getting in and out of the car. So I think every time you take them out, this probably is more of a regular scenario.
First of all, we can talk about the handy bar. The handy bar provides the client
Has anyone heard of a handy bar? Yes? Yeah, they're fantastic.
with a stable surface to push up from during transfers. It is portable and lightweight, and it's easily fitted into the car door latch once the door is opened. Please note, this must be removed prior to closing the door. The thin disc cushion. Now this uses two disc layers separated by smooth fabric to encourage less friction and easy sliding and gliding. When the client sits on the seat facing out to the footpath, they can then easily swivel their legs into the car while remaining seated with less friction or resistance from clothing against the seat. The transfer strap. This strap hooks over the window frame when the window is open. It is length adjustable.
I probably haven't recommended this one before to people. I'm not a big fan of straps where people have to do a lot of hard pulling because it's really hard on the shoulders. What I usually recommend instead is opening the window of the car door fully so that you can actually hold on, and having someone bracing the car door so it's not going to flap around, and you can hold on to the car handy. So you've used your swivel cushion to swivel out, your legs are out, car handy in one hand, hand on that open window in the other, and you're pushing down instead, which is much safer for your shoulders. So I don't particularly recommend this one.
Adjustable, and then provides a sturdy handle the client can grab onto when transferring out of the vehicle. For car transfers, that is getting in and out of a car. First of all, you can approach the vehicle and have the client turn so they can feel the car seat behind their legs and they are facing out towards the footpath. Then they reach back for the handy bar. They can push their bottom out and lower down into the seat. The carer can then provide assistance and guide their head safely
Watch the head.
into the car. The client is then assisted with the swivel and to lift their legs into the car.
When you assist someone with their legs, just watch out for your back because you do have to lean quite low. If it's possible with your knees, try and bend through the knees instead of flexing through the back to reach down. When you kind of keep your legs straight and you're reaching to help them with their legs, that puts a lot of pressure on your low back. So you want to keep your hips straight and you want to squat down instead and get them to help themselves as much as possible, and maybe you just guide them under the thigh for the last little bit to bring the foot inside the car well. So you won't be strangers to seeing lots of people with different types of mobility aids. Probably most common ones are the ones that I've included here, a mixture of sticks, crutches, or types of walking frames. And then there's some privately available options. These are the ones that I most commonly give out to my patients. So the main thing about, you don't need to be, super expert at managing the height and things, but if you spot that a frame, like the handle looks about the wrong height, it's an easy fix with the push pins on the sides. As a general rule of thumb, I usually say that the handle should be around hip height, but obviously everyone's got different arm lengths. What I look for when I adjust someone's crutches or their handles is that they've got a slight 10 or 15 degree bend in the elbow. You don't want the elbow to be 90 degrees up high like this, but you also don't want the elbows to be fully straight, because then it's probably too low and they're leaning down on it. If the handles are too high, the body will naturally adjust and the person will probably end up pushing the frame out to get that natural bend in the elbow. So a lot of the time I see people and they're holding the frame out really far and they're thinking, if I just push the handles up further, it'll push me up, but actually it's doing the opposite effect. It's causing them to push the frame up further because their elbows naturally want to rest in that position. So you want to have handles as close to your hips as possible, and you want to have a little bit of a slight bend in the elbow, shoulders nice and relaxed so they're not pushed up to the ears, and you're also not hunching forward to the back nice and straight. That's a general rule of thumb for adjusting it, but obviously some people might be comfortable with using something for a long period of time. So if they say, nope, that's how I like it, that's how I've always used it, I wouldn't argue with them. I'll just let them use it however they're comfortable with. And sometimes people have figured out a special way of having it, and that's, other people have tried to tell them otherwise and it's never been quite as comfortable. So we're only seeing them for a short period. It's important to respect that they've had their own experiences. The main thing with using sticks and crutches is you want to make the golden triangle. So you don't want to have your sticks or crutches to the side of you, because that doesn't offer any stability if they fall forwards or backwards. You want to have the crutch or stick in front, so that if you had one in each hand, it makes a triangle shape with your feet. So you've got two sticks on either side and then your feet in the centre. Or you can imagine you're missing one corner of the triangle if you just had the one side. And that means that if they go to the side, they can lean into the crutch, but also if they go forwards, they can lean into the crutch as well. On stairs and slopes, it's important to take more care, because this is Wellington, so we've got variable footpaths around here. On the stairs, you wouldn't be able to take a frame on the stairs, so it would have to be a stick or a crutch. And then on the slopes, if you're on a frame, I do recommend using the brakes if you're going down slope. Even if it looks like it's only a mild slope, you'd be surprised at how quickly the frame can roll through. So I'd get them to squeeze the brakes as they're going down. If their grip strength isn't what it used to be, you can actually put the brakes on full and keep the brakes locked on while you're going down the slope the whole way. It'll really slow them down and give them a lot of traction so they don't feel like the momentum's about to take them away. I'm going to go into instructions for how to use sticks and crutches on the stairs next, but are there any questions about general use of the mobility aids for now?
The only one I've got is, sometimes when they are maybe taking the strollers outside for the first time, when they're starting walking, and it's that whole position of it, the stroller getting ahead of them, and and then they're at that point where you think, oh my God, that's going to actually take off, and they're going to just go splat on the face, and they should be up. Where should they be relative to the stroller?
Great question. They need to be as close into the stroller as they possibly can. And as you can see, there's a fundamental problem with that with this model, because the seat, which so many people love, actually gets in the way of your knees, and it stops you from being able to get as close to the frame as where I would ideally like them to be. With this green one here, that's all empty space inside, because if you have a look at my positioning, your hands should be resting by your hips, and that means that the frame needs to be right in close. As soon as there's any kind of blockage over here, you push it out and you end up flexing over it, and it changes your posture. And even more so if you're outside and there's a camber in the road and it's taken you away. So I would say that ideally, unless this is someone who's gone out and privately purchased their frame, a physiotherapist or a health professional should have prescribed them the right frame. And everyone loves this frame, but actually there are some drawbacks in terms of being able to get it close enough. You're never going to be able to get the handles right underneath your shoulders with that model, because your knees will literally be blocked. And so if they're really struggling with that, unless they absolutely need the seat to be able to sit down for breaks on their longer walks. I don't always gravitate towards that as the default option. I actually do have a preference for this frame if they can manage it and they're going to be walking in places where they can manage distances between seats, because you can get a much better posture. And then of course the other thing is feeling like the frame's running away from you. The first thing is to slow down. They're probably trying to go too quickly and they're pushing the frame out and their legs aren't catching up to the frame. They need to slow down and think about where they're keeping their hands, and they always need to be pulling those handles in close to their hips. So they should be walking like this rather than feeling like they're bearing weight through the arms and letting it go ahead of them. And then obviously using the brakes judiciously if that's happening, so lots of brake practice. But I wouldn't be expecting you to be doing that work. If you're finding there's some real issues with using that frame, they need to be referred back for a physiotherapy review. I don't think that's fair on the volunteers to be, but you know, you're sometimes the first one on the scene to identify this is a problem and they don't look very good with their frame, and then maybe they need to go back to the GP to talk about, I need to have a physio, or maybe they're already seeing a physiotherapist and they need to get in touch with them. Yeah, but those are just some, you know, kind of tips that you can try in the very first instance if you're thinking we're already here. But yes, if it's not looking right, please do ask for a further assessment.
When someone's leaning forward,
yes,
the brakes don't work as well.
No.
There's no weight on it.
Correct, yeah, absolutely. The frames are designed to be working best when they're close to your sides. Yeah, absolutely.
Calista, could you just talk about the walking stick?
Yes, yes.
Please. How, when people are using a walking stick,
yes,
and they've got a slight limp,
yes,
which
side?
Which side?
Yes, it should be. This is a fantastic question, so it needs to be opposite to their weak or painful side. And I think, has anyone watched the series House? And he's got a terrible walking pattern where he like waddles. And I remember when I was in physio school, my lecturers used him as an example of what not to do. And the reason he waddles like that is because he's using the stick on his sore and his affected side. You want it to be on the opposite side, because if you think, imagine if you've got a sore left hip and you're using the stick this way, you don't really want to weight be on this side. So when you're trying to put weight through it, you lean all your weight on the stick instead. And then yes, exactly. So a lot of people think I need to use it on the sore side, but actually because your arms swing in the opposite direction, if you have the stick on your right side and you've got a sore left hip, when you come forwards you lean into the stick and that kind of straightens you up, and then you can walk through, and then it kind of braces your core and you walk through, rather than kind of doing this kind of waddling kind of walk all the time. Yeah, so that's a great question. Are there any other questions about the sticks or crutches?
I was just wondering the little loop.
Yes.
Is that useful to put over someone's
their arm?
If they do fall and I've still got it on them?
Well, it doesn't do much for it because they probably will naturally let go. Well, I don't use the loop very often. What it could be helpful for is for any patients who have some memory issues. If they're forgetting to take their stick with them when they go, I'll just tell them to keep it looped around the arm, so when they stand up, they're like, oh, I've got this thing, all right, and they start to walk. But if they're about to fall, there's no real safe way to stop someone from falling. If they're only having a little stumble and you're right there, then that's fine. But if they're already near the ground, you trying to stop them to fall is just going to take you both down. Just let it happen and then assess for afterwards. Yeah. So I know it sounds horrible, but you don't want two people to injured if instead of one person injured if there's going to be an injury. So if that's the case and they're going, they're probably not going to be able to hold on to the stick that much. Yeah. Okay, so here is another key thing to talk about, is what order do you go up and down the stairs in when you're using a stick or a crutch. There's a very handy acronym, and it's to think of gas goes upwards, and when you sag downwards, and it's to help you remember the order of which leg and which stick goes first. So if gas goes upwards, when you're going upstairs, you want to lead with their strong leg, their stronger leg, whatever side is not as painful or it's got more strength. And then you want to bring the other leg up, and then the stick goes up afterwards. Because when you lead up, that first leg that goes up takes all of your weight, and you have to really push through to get your other leg up, and you can use the stick behind you to help leverage yourself up at the same time. When you're going down, it's exactly the opposite. So you want to get the stick down so you can lean your weight through it, and then you actually want to go with the sore leg first, because as you lift it off the step, that leg that remains behind bears all of your weight. So it actually has to be the stronger leg that goes down last. So you get the stick down, you're bracing through there, you get your sore leg down first, and then you can take your weight off that strong leg and bring it down the step. So if you're ever confused, just think back to gas rises up and you sag downwards, and that'll help remind you what order you go in. And then I think that if you're taking people for a walk, often they're needing a little bit of a breather in between. And Nikki just asked to say, are there any ways that you can really optimise that time with them so it's not just passive rest and they're really recovering quickly to get back into their walk? So there's a couple of things they can try. Most often people are getting, they need a seated break for two reasons. Either they're getting really breathless and tired, or they're getting quite sore and painful. So if they're getting quite breathless and they're really short of breath, they're breathing hard from exercising, you can try and slow down their breathing rate by using something called the pursed lip breathing. This is especially helpful if the person has something like COPD and they're having trouble kind of taking their next inhale of breath. It kind of feels like they're gasping for air because they can't exhale out properly to have enough space for the next breath. So you want to imagine that you're blowing out through a straw. So if you all practice the pursed lip breathing, you want to try and breathe in through your nose as much as possible. It may not be if they're really breathless, but if you can, try and breathe in through your nose. And when you breathe out, imagine you're blowing out through a straw. Really lengthen that exhale and don't stop until you feel like you've exhaled everything out from your lungs. So in through the nose and out through the blowing straw. So much longer than just breathing out. It kind of slows down the airflow so that it lengthens out your exhale, and it can help to bring down their respiratory rate and help to slow down their breathing. If you're finding that they're breathing a lot through the chest and through the shoulders, it might look like this. Like this, and it's using a lot of these muscles up here, which is not actually your predominant breathing muscle. It's your diaphragm that needs to be working. This is the main breathing muscle that needs to switch on and to use for effective breathing. So if they're using a lot of these muscles, what I get them to do is just put one hand on their tummy and one hand on their chest. So try that now. And if you close your eyes, just feel for yourself which hand seems to be moving more. Is it the top hand or the bottom hand? If you just relax your breathing, hopefully for most of you, it is your bottom hand that's doing most of the work. If it's the top hand that's moving more, you could also benefit from this exercise. If they're feeling like they're really struggling for breath, do a bit of pursed lip breathing, get their breathing to slow down, and then get them to close their eyes and just relax, one hand on the tummy, one hand on the diaphragm, and tell them just focus on letting that bottom hand move out a little bit more than the top hand. It's okay if that top hand still moves, but just try and see if you can get that bottom hand to move a little bit more. And that'll help them to recruit the diaphragm so they actually breathe into the diaphragm instead. And then of course relaxing the shoulders. I think it has something to do with the handle height as well. If the handle height isn't right and they're standing like this all the time, they'll get such tight and sore traps, and that also affects their breathing because they're stuck like this all the time. The shoulders need to be down in a relaxed position whenever they're positioned in standing or in sitting. And so a little bit of advice around that, especially if you're trying to settle their breathing, just relax your shoulders, shake them out, and just try and keep them pushed down towards your chair while you do these breathing kind of exercises. Okay, the next exercise is probably less so for people who are needing a seated break in the middle of walking, and more so for people who are sore and they're about to start their walk. So if you've gone to visit a client and they've been sitting in their couch watching telly, and you say, right, let's get you for your walk now, and say, oh, my hips taking a while to loosen up. Yeah, probably all of us. The reason for that is because your joints get really dry if you don't move them. There's a lubricant that's naturally secreted in your joints called synovial fluid. It's kind of like CRC for your joints, and it needs to move for it to be secreted. And so if you've been sitting still and you haven't been, like now for instance, you might all be feeling a bit stiff when you get up, then the joints are dry, there's no lubrication in the joints. So what you can do is prime the joints before you get ready to stand, either from the bed, from the chair, or from the car, and just get them to do a few pumps. So I just get them to do maybe 20 of these on each side where they're just bringing the leg in and out. And then if it's the hip that's a problem, I do 20 marches so that you get them sitting and they're just doing a few of these just to get the hips moving. If they do about 20 of these, it just helps to smooth it out. Once they start walking, then things really start to loosen. But the start after you haven't been moving for a while is always quite dry and painful. And then if you're finding that they're getting muscular pain, so if they're telling you, oh, I'm really sore with the walking, it's not in the knee, it's kind of in the back of the thigh, or it's in the calf, then when they're sitting down, you can take the opportunity to do a couple of stretches just to help relax the muscle and get them ready to go and start walking again. I would say that the easiest ones to do are probably your hamstring stretch. So you get them shuffling to the edge of the chair. We can all try this now. Straighten out your leg, and then you just sliding your hand down the leg until you feel a bit of tightness in the back of your thigh. Some of you might be more flexible than others, and I know I've got one tight side and one stretchy side. And you want to hold that for about 30 counts before you come back up. If you want to do the calf, you're in the same position, you just get them to pull their toes up. It's not as much of a stretch as if you had a towel, but if you're out and about, you probably don't have that with you. So you just get them to pull their toes up and just feel that bit of tightness in the back of the calf as well. The hip stretch, I kind of say with a bit of a caveat, because if the person you're visiting has had a hip replacement, they may not like to be stretched in this position. But let's say they haven't had any hip replacements, you get them to cross their legs and just hug the knee towards you. And then if you don't feel a stretch yet, if you're really stretchy, pull that knee across your body a bit more, and then pull that knee towards you a bit more. You'll feel a nice stretch right here in your glute muscle and your outer thigh. So those are some simple seated stretches, but just be careful with that last one, because if they've had a prosthetic hip, they won't like it. Okay, and then let's say it's a rainy day and you're thinking, well, I'm here, I've already driven all this way, might as well make the most of it. There's a couple of exercises I've set up that you can go through with your patients, your clients. Let's start with the sitting exercises. Some of them we went through just now to help loosen up the joint, so you can do some marching. Not only does it help loosen up the hip joint, but it also works your hip flexor muscle here in the front, so a bit of strengthening. If you pump your arms, then you get a bit of cardio going, so feel free. And then you can do the knees, so you're straightening and bending. And then you can also try and tuck, if they're not in a lazy boy, you can try and tuck your foot backwards as well, so you're working the hamstring at the same time. So here you're working your quad muscles at the front of the thigh, and then if you slide it back, then you're working your hamstring at the back. 2 for the price of 1. I like multi-use exercises. So doing this, loosening up the joint and firing up those muscles on either side of the knee. And then if we want to do a little bit of upper body work, this is good for the posture, but also good for getting the breathing rate up, so for your cardiovascular fitness. So in here, she's got her arms like this, and then you can just do some raises, back down. Some raises, back down. If you do this enough times, it'll start getting your breathing up actually. And then you can also...
Should they be breathing in and out?
I mean...
In on the way up or out?
Yeah, breathe in on the way up and out on the way down, just because it mimics the natural movement of your rib cage. As you're lifting your arms, your rib cage kind of flares and you naturally can breathe in a little bit deeper, and then breathing out to relax and come down. If you want to work those back muscles, if you're seeing some people who are starting to get this kind of posture and you want to work these back muscles, you want to do some rows like this. In the picture I've included, they have an exercise band, but not everyone's got that. So even without them, feel free to just bring them back and squeezing your shoulder blades and then back out. And pulling them back, trying to imagine you're trying to elbow someone behind you, squeezing behind you, get out of my way, and then come forwards again. So a few arm exercises. And then this one here is to try and get a bit of the glute muscle going. So here you can either do it 2 ways. You can bring your leg out to the side like this and back in, out to the side like this, and it's just working that hip muscle on the side. If they can't manage that, you can also do a big walk out, walk in, walk out, walk in, exactly like this. Might be a little bit easier on the hip. And then a little bit of movement just to free up their back if they're quite stiff from sitting in the chair all day. Get them sitting really tall. Think string on your head pulled up to the ceiling, sitting tall. And then you're just going to gently turn. In the picture, she's got her arms crossed. You don't want to overdo it because it may strain the back if you end up pressing too far. But if you do want a bit more of a stretch, you can reach around to the chair and just pull gently to really feel that through your upper back and your lower back. And then you can do to the other side. But yeah, just a few of these just to help free up the back a little bit. And then the last one is probably the most bang for buck exercise, because we all have to do it. We all have to stand up at some point. Doing a few stands like this is a full leg workout and a core workout and a cardiovascular workout. So I say if you can start with 5 of these, it's pretty good. some of you may like to do this program as a bit of a warm-up before you go and take them for their walk. If they're feeling really stiff and sore, and just getting the body moving first. They might be a bit more tired though, so you might have to do a smaller walk after this. But the sit to stands are really effective, starting with 5, aiming for 10, trying not to use your hands if you can, because then you really get the benefit of your legs. But if they absolutely need to use their hands, then you can also push off a little bit through your hands. If any of you have gone to Steady As You Go, this will probably be one of the core exercises. Okay, and then if you want to swap over to the other page now, we'll finish just by looking at the lying exercises. So I don't imagine you'll have too many cases where you come and the patient is just in bed and unable to get up, but if that's the case, then you can start with a little bit of core activation. So what they do here is they're lying flat on their back, and then you just get them to try and imagine they're flattening the low part of their back into the bed. And what that'll do is it'll activate the front of their abdominal muscles, and it will just switch on their tummy so that they're able to use their core more effectively. So you get them lying, you can bend your knees up. So you're lying like this, bending your knees up. And then you just want to try and imagine you're flattening your back into the bed. And sometimes I put my hand under their low back just to give them a bit more feedback, but the bed should be enough. Otherwise, in that position, you want to try and imagine you're doing some slides like this, and that gets the hip and the knee going. So a bit of the muscles activating, but also gets the joints moving. So you're just straightening out the leg and lying, and then bending and sliding your foot back again. Unfortunately, especially for ladies, as we get older and we're losing estrogen, it naturally kind of causes us to be at more risk of developing reduced bone mass. So that's just a very sad and unfortunate fact of nature for all of us ladies. So that's why it's really important to be doing weight-bearing exercises. That's probably one of the main things you can be doing to keep your bones strong. If you're sitting and you're lying all the time like a lot of your clients are, and they're not getting outside and they're not getting sunshine, they're at high risk of developing reduced bone density because their bones aren't strong and they're not being loaded through, which is what helps to keep the bone matrix strong as well. So walking counts as a weight-bearing exercise. Just regular walking, standing, anything where you're standing and you're having to bear weight through your bones is really important for your bones. Yeah. In general, falls prevention type exercises are very similar. They should all kind of be developed. I don't know if any of you have heard the Otago exercise program. I'm so proud of it because it was designed in New Zealand from a New Zealand study, and now it's used internationally, and it's what the Steady As You Go classes are based off, and it's what a lot of these exercises are based off. I think the Nimble program is also based off the same research with some variations. So I'd be very much for people using as much as they can, all the resources at their disposal to try and get access to as many exercise options as possible. And I did want to finish my presentation by saying, like Nikki said, I'm probably a high referrer. I may be your most enthusiastic referrer, because I cannot say enough how grateful I am for the age concern visitor and walking services. I have referred countless now in the 10 years I've been in Wellington, and I was here before the service started, and I remember when the service started and all the physios were so excited about it, because it truly is such an amazing community-based service. We only dip in and dip out for short periods of time, us physios. We see them, we try and get them better, and then we leave them, and that relationship is gone. But you guys, you persevere, and like Nikki said, that relationship is long-lasting and enduring. And I've had people tell me that they've not only started doing walking, but they've made a friend. And it's also that social component, which is so valuable, because it's so important for them to get that feeling of social connection, but also that stimulation for them to have conversation again. It can be just as valuable as the exercise itself, because your brain also needs to be exercised, and that's not just through physical activity alone, it's also through that social connection. So I prioritised coming to this presentation today because I wanted to tell you all how thankful I am for your service and how many of my patients have benefited from your care. And I hope that in some small way this is just me giving back to what I know that you have given to all of our community as well. So thank you.
Thank you.